Good evening, I'm David Kramer with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website, weather.gov/Alaska, get any updates to the forecast, or check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we might have out for your area. You can also call our weather info line, 1-800-472-0391, get any updates to the forecast through that means as well. Starting off, a reminder that we are in breakup and river watch season is underway now, so if you are out by any of the rivers and notice any changes in the ice conditions on those rivers or any flooding potential, we appreciate any pictures, videos, or even just reports from the field. And you can submit those through our email, nws.ar.aprfc@noaa.gov, or you can just call the line at 1-800-847-1739. We appreciate any reports for river conditions during the breakup season. Taking a look at our satellite imagery, we have a low pressure system out by the western Aleutians that is slowly tracking into the western portion of the Bering Sea. The frontal system with this is draped through the southern portion of the Bering and then out over the central Aleutian Islands. Out ahead of this system, some ridging before we get into mainland Alaska, where there's some lighter cloud cover around some of the areas, especially around the mountains and up along the north slope. And then finally down in the Panhandle area, we have some cloud cover moving through with some showers around the southeastern portions of the state. As we look at our surface map for the remainder of today, we can see some troughing out over the Panhandle area where we do have some rain showers underneath. In some of the higher elevations, especially to the north, we are seeing some of those areas mixing with snow. And then we have some showers in the eastern portions of mainland Alaska, snow in some of the higher elevations, primarily rain in the low-lying areas, until we get up into the Brooks Range and farther north where we still have snow along the north slope. High pressure extending down the west coast of the state through the Alaska Peninsula, and that's blocking our system that is out over the eastern portion of the western portion of the Bering Sea rather, and keeping that front from progressing too quickly to the east, leaving rain out over the central Aleutians and extending out over the western Aleutian Islands. As we move into tonight, that slow moving front is going to push closer towards the eastern Aleutians as our ridging moves a little bit farther to the east as well, and that's going to spread rain to the eastern Aleutians through the western Aleutian Islands, with some of that rain approaching the Pribilof Islands overnight tonight. As we get into the Alaska Peninsula where the ridging is, we are expecting to see drier conditions that will extend up the west coast of the state and up into where we have high pressure along the Arctic coastline up north. We'll have some lighter showers throughout some of the central and eastern portions of mainland Alaska, but much of south central Alaska will still be dry through tonight, and we'll see some showers out through much of the Panhandle area, primarily rain in low-lying areas. As we move into Wednesday, still some lighter shower activity in the Panhandle, diminishing a little bit from what we had seen for Tuesday into tonight. And then we have a system approaching the Gulf of Alaska from the south, starting to bring rain closer towards the Gulf waters. Out over mainland Alaska, some lighter showers through much of the central and northern places into the Brooks Range. But as we get up along the Arctic coastline, high pressure dominating up over the Arctic Ocean, leaving the areas primarily pretty dry until we get to some of those places by Kaktovik and Deadhorse. Then for our system that was out over the Bering Sea, continuing its slow progression to the east, starting to bring rain to the Alaska Peninsula as well as all of the Aleutian Islands, with rain also making it in over the Pribilof Islands. As we move into Thursday, we're seeing another system coming in from the west, bringing rain throughout the Aleutians into the Alaska Peninsula, and remnants of our old system pushing in some precip to the western coast of mainland Alaska. Starting to see it mix with snow as we get up by the Norton Sound area, but the majority of mainland Alaska should still be pretty dry as we have high pressure out over the northern Gulf and more high pressure out up over the Arctic Ocean. This is resulting in drier conditions for much of the northern and eastern portions of the mainland and extending down into south central Alaska as well. However, Kodiak Island looks to have some rain showers on Thursday. Then in the Panhandle area, southern locations are seeing more of the heavier showers, but drier as we get farther to the north, especially as we get closer towards Sitka and Yakutat areas. Looking at our temperatures, low temps on Wednesday morning down in the Panhandle area, dropping down below 40 degrees into the 30s for most locations. Sitka going to stay a little bit warmer at 40 degrees, and Yakutat dropping down to 37. For South Central Alaska, temperatures dropping down through the lower to mid 30s for most locations. Coldest up in the Copper River Basin, 30 degrees for Volcana, as well as at Kenai, dropping down to 30 as well. Then Wednesday afternoon, high temperatures starting off in the Panhandle, getting up to near 50 degrees for most locations. A little bit cooler now at Sitka, only getting up to 43 degrees on Wednesday. Then for South Central Alaska, most locations in the upper 40s, few places getting up into the 50s. Seward getting up to 54 degrees, Anchorage at 53, and then Talkeetna getting up to 55. Kodiak also getting up to 55 down there to the south. Our low temps on Thursday morning for the Panhandle area dropping down into the mid to upper 30s, and for South Central Alaska dropping down into the lower to mid 30s. Coldest is going to be up there at Volcana at 31 degrees. And then our Thursday afternoon highs in the Panhandle area, temperatures getting up in the upper 40s to near 50 degrees, and Skagway getting up all the way to 53 degrees. As we move to South Central Alaska, temperatures getting up to near 50 degrees for many locations in South Central as well. A little bit cooler on the Kenai Peninsula. Kenai only getting up to 46, and Homer getting up to 47. 47 for Valdez as well. As we move up into the interior portions of the state, much of the interior will drop down to right around 30 degrees, some places making it into the 20s. We have Arctic Village getting down to 13 degrees rather, and Fort Yukon getting down to 23. Up along the Arctic coastline, dropping down into the single digits, primarily into the teens for the Kotzebue Sound area, with Kotzebue getting down to 22 degrees, and mid-20s for much of the Norton Sound, with Gamble getting down to 23. As we move into Wednesday afternoon, in the 40s for most of the interior, a little bit colder as we get farther to the west. Ambler getting up to 35 degrees. And then along the Arctic coastline, getting up into the teens in most locations. Staying a little bit cooler, Utqiagvik only getting up to 11 degrees there. In the 20s for much of the Kotzebue Sound area, with Kotzebue getting up to 30 degrees. Norton Sound area, upper 30s to near 40 degrees are expected. For Thursday, morning lows in the interior dropping down to just below freezing for many locations. And Galena getting down to 34 degrees, staying above that freezing mark, and other western locations also going to stay a little bit warmer. As we get to the Arctic coastline, however, we're going to drop all the way down to near zero, with Dead Horse getting below zero at -2. Into the teens to lower 20s for the Kotzebue Sound area, and right around freezing for the Norton Sound area. And our Thursday afternoon highs in the interior getting up into the lower 50s for southern locations, a little bit cooler to the north, only getting into the 40s there. Up along the Arctic coastline, getting into the teens for most locations. Kaktovik a little bit warmer at 21 degrees expected. Just above freezing for the Kotzebue Sound area, with Kotzebue getting up to 34 degrees, and lower 40s for the Norton Sound area. As we move into the southwestern portion of the state, dropping down to near freezing for southwest Alaska, and the mid to upper 30s for the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula. Wednesday afternoon, getting up to near 50 degrees for much of the interior portions of southwest Alaska. A little bit cooler along the coastline, only near 40 there. In the lower to mid 40s for the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutian Islands. Thursday morning lows dropping down into the lower to mid 30s for southwest. Again, a little bit cooler along the coastline, as well as some of the places a little bit more in the interior. And then for the Alaska Peninsula, dropping down into the mid to upper 30s, and mid to upper 30s for the Aleutian Islands as well, with 31 degrees for that low for St. Paul. Thursday afternoon highs getting up to above 50 for interior locations, and closer to 40 for some places near the coast. Along the Alaska Peninsula, down or up into the lower 40s, and lower 40s are going to continue throughout the Aleutian Islands. For our climate forecast, we are looking at our 6 to 10 day outlook. The west coast up through the Arctic coastline all have higher chances to be above normal temperatures in that 6 to 10 day. However, South Central Alaska and down into the Panhandle have higher chances to be below normal temperatures. As we look at the 8 to 14 day, pretty similar pattern. However, our area of potential warmer temperatures has expanded a little bit further to the east and south, and pushed off the area over South Central a little bit farther to the east. That is going to be chances to be below normal for that southeastern portion of the mainland, as well as southeast Alaska. As we look at our precip forecast for the 6 to 10 day, much of the mainland except the west coast has higher chances to be above normal, and that is going to extend down into the Alaska Peninsula as well as down into the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And moving on to flying weather, we've got IFR north slope to the Arctic coast through the central interior, areas IFR along with some areas of marginal VFR and some scattered areas of VFR, mostly VFR south and east of the Alaska Range there, Copper River Basin, Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, Manuscus, Assiniboine Valley, Kodiak Island, all VFR, areas of IFR and marginal VFR over the Bering Sea, and some IFR over the northern Panhandle, marginal conditions to the south. And for the afternoon, marginal VFR southeast coast, north Gulf Coast, into Prince William Sound. They've pushed it into Valdez, across the Copper River Basin. Central interior looks pretty marginal. IFR for the north slope, marginal for the Arctic coast, and IFR for the Bering Sea, marginal VFR for the Aleutians. And moving on to the Thursday morning forecast, lower conditions move on into Kodiak Island. You see IFR across the southern island, otherwise marginal VFR now. All across south central Alaska, southern half of Alaska, marginal VFR with some scattered IFR. Northern half south of the Brooks Range, some marginal VFR with areas of VFR, but north of the Brooks Range there to the Arctic coast, IFR. Bering Sea, IFR, as well as the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. And for Thursday afternoon, Bering Sea, big area of IFR, possible again. From St. Lawrence Island right on down to Adak and Atka, marginal VFR, Amchitka Island westward to Shimei and Attu. Fox Island's marginal, Alaska Peninsula mostly marginal with some VFR there, and then mostly VFR for southern Alaska. Some marginal VFR scattered around the central interior, otherwise areas of marginal VFR and VFR right on out to the Arctic coast, with IFR over the Gulf of Alaska. Catching the east side of Kodiak Island there, right near Chiniak, Marmot Bay, Pasagchak, down to close to Sitkinak, and then on up to southern Prince William Sound, over to Cape St. Elias. Marginal VFR, southern or central southeast coast with some VFR thrown in. Anatuvik, marginal at times tomorrow. Adigan, same forecast, look for marginal VFR at times. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR throughout the day on Wednesday. Rainy, occasionally marginal. Windy, VFR. Isabel, occasionally marginal. Mentasta, VFR. Tanita, occasionally marginal. And for Portage, VFR. Chilkoot and White, occasionally marginal. And for the freezing levels, 2,000 to 6,000 feet, 2,000 feet, pulling way up into the Bering Sea there, 4,000 feet north of the Pribilofs, but 6,000 feet not quite making the scene there. But 2,000 feet across southern Alaska and at the surface all the way up to the Brooks Range. And for the icing potential, just some mixed, possibly mixed icing, 6,000 to 10,000 feet of the light variety. I wouldn't even call it moderate there for the southeast coast. Maybe some isolated moderate rime icing, a couple of boundaries there. Pribilofs to the Alaska Peninsula and the Fox Islands, actually on Alaska Island, could see some elevated icing potential. Also a threat there, more of a mixed nature for Adak and Atka back to Kiska Island. And for the jet stream, ridging from southeast to northwest there from the Bristol Bay area right up into the Russian Far East. So upper level low, cold upper low dropping down to the lower Yukon River Valley area. And we got northeast flow around that. Northerlies up to 65 knots through the Bering Strait, turning westerly on the south side of that feature, then back to the northwest across Kodiak Island. Southeast wind, central Bering Sea, 75 to 80 knots, and then the stronger jet there just clipping the western Aleutians at 100 knots, otherwise light winds elsewhere. And at 9,000 feet, light variable winds over much of mainland Alaska. We have that low there just east of St. Lawrence Island. North side of that could be 25 knot easterlies. Otherwise, not too bad. You can see light variable wind conditions right on down into Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island. Across the Gulf of Alaska, some weak high pressure in the Panhandle, light winds into the Northwest Territory. Stronger winds out west, up to 35 to 45 knots there ahead of that complex low center. A couple of low centers, one just north of Atka Island, other one near Shimei. And for 3,000 feet, more or less the same pattern. Easterlies up to 30 knots around right over Point Ley on the western Arctic coast. Otherwise, a south to southeast wind band there, 30 to 35 knots. Alaska Peninsula across the Pribilos, northern Bering Sea. Turbulence. Light to isolated moderate chop, western Brooks Range, mechanical turbulence, Alaska Peninsula, and from Nikolsky westward to Shimia.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service, and joining us today, two more people to talk about the augmented reality sandbox. It's Alana Valaji. She's a University of Alaska Fairbanks mechanical engineering student, helped design and work on the details to make this new type of sandbox there. Thanks for joining us, Alana. Thanks. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator for AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. It's a program funded nationally by the National Science Foundation, right?
Yes.
Okay. Alana, tell us about how you changed and adapted this version of the augmented reality sandbox. It's a really cool tool.
So Gina approached us with 3 goals for this new version of the sandbox. They wanted it to be compact in a light system that could travel around the state. They wanted it to be child-oriented, so we designed the sandbox to have 3 different levels.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. You can have younger children, you can have high school kids. I guess I should say high school teenagers.
Sure.
And then we also designed it to be more marketable, user-friendly, so that this could be seen eventually in classrooms all over the place, all over the state.
Okay. And you had a big hand in this, but this was a team approach, right?
Definitely. It was a really good experience for myself, for George Stevens, who we'll see later.
One of our hand models today. Yeah.
For 2 other members who aren't here today, Cody Klingman and Austin Hunt. And it was just a really good learning experience all around.
Very good. And this is something that is part of your learning experience as well, so you get to check a box in your education.
Yeah,
right?
it's a requirement for seniors of mechanical engineering at University of Alaska Fairbanks.
Very good. Very good. Well, it is a wonderfully inquisitive tool, fun to play with, and I hope to get my hands in the sand here in just a little bit. But it's also part of a bigger program, something that we were talking about a moment ago, AKwx, and that's what Courtney is here to tell us more about. What is AKwx and why do you need a sandbox?
Well, AKwx, as you mentioned, is a national program. We're funded nationally, but we're actually located statewide. We're at UAF, we're at UAA, we're in Southeast at UAS. And she mentioned, you know, taking the sandbox as an educational tool, and that's where I'm an outreach coordinator for the South Central test case.
Okay.
Our focus is on the Kenai watershed, and we are really interested in using these tools like the sandbox to interact with the students down there and get them interested in STEM and also communicate the research findings that we've been having throughout the state.
Okay. And one of those, as George and Eric are kind of changing the contours for us there from UAF to maybe something that resembles a little bit of something more of the Kenai watershed, which is one of your focuses for the study, right? And specifically looking at some of the changes there and how that impacts people and also the salmon.
Yes, it is all of our research is social and environmental.
Okay.
So we have social scientists working hand in hand with our environmental scientists. One of the things we're studying is Upper Russian Lake, and we have a researcher taking sediment cores from that lake. So one of the things we're going to use the sandbox to communicate is how the landscape changed over a long period of time, thousands of years, going from glacier, covered by glacier ice, to being filled with water. And then
that's what they're doing right now.
Exactly. So
live.
So they're moving
cool.
the water around. And then I think they've got some props over there, because we're also going to go a little bit more in depth and explain how the salmon got there.
Okay.
So using
there's
these,
the salmon.
Exactly. Oh, I think there's a few more.
Yeah, we like more salmon in Alaska. More salmon.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really taking the findings from our research grant and just trying to connect with the community and translate it in a really hands-on and exciting way, so people can, you know, interact with us as much as possible.
Well, sure. That makes the learning and the science real and quite literally in your face, rather than just some boring black and white paper that you have to read about. This is something that people can understand better because it's visual and they're touching and feeling and seeing these changes, right?
Yeah, and get them engaged. And then outreach is a huge component, and working with the younger students, and actually even, I mean, working with the UAF graduate and engineering students it's a huge part of our grant, and we really enjoy it.
Oh, it is wonderfully exciting. And so, Alana, you were telling us that this is built to travel.
Right.
And this is built to do more things than version 1. Where can this type of project go in Alaska? And what can it demonstrate?
I mean, we were hoping to eventually get to villages that were harder to reach, that you couldn't necessarily move a whole fixed instrument to, right? You need something that can pack up, fit in your truck bed. I mean, one of the most attractive parts of this project is that this was going to be something that was used past our graduation point. You know, this is going to be something that lives in the state for years.
Right, right. Well, it looks like you're well on your way with that. So what are, give me another example. What else can this show us? We've talked about the Kenai River watershed. What's the coolest thing that you've played in the sand with? What's your idea?
Well, I definitely enjoy the props, but we also like kind of building up a giant mound, and if you put some water behind it, you can make a little runway, I guess, and you know, demonstrate the effects of the hydrology by just putting up a dam and letting it all pour right down. And so that could, I think you mentioned it earlier, you could even demonstrate the effects of a tsunami.
Right.
Or something along those lines.
So it's not just topography, but it's also hydrology and coastal surge mapping and some of the coastal changes that we're seeing here in Alaska, and seeing what the smaller changes in the sandbox might do to kind of a real effect of a slosh or a push of water up on the coast. Tsunami inundation mapping, or even glacial dam release, as some has been demonstrated before. So wow, that's just an impressive thing. That it seems like the possibilities are nearly endless with this, and probably even more ideas that are popping up in your head too.
Yeah, as we speak.
Very cool. All right. Well, if folks want to get more information about EPSCoR, you guys are online. You're on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. AKEPSCOR, right? EPSCoR, Alaska EPSCoR, that is. And again, you guys are funded by the National Science Foundation, so more to come from that, and a longer-term study there. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. Congratulations on your hard work there. This is really fun. And for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and I'm going to go play in the sandbox there. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Looking at coastal water forecast, pretty light winds across the panhandle for tomorrow. Out along the coast, mostly westerlies at 10 knots with 4 to 5 foot seas. And the inside waters, Stevens Passage, light northwest winds, 15 knots, and the central northern inner channels, north to northwest breezes at 10 knots with slight seas. And for the Thursday outlook, north winds 10 knots for Lincoln on Glacier Bay, central and southern inner channels, northwest winds at 10 knots. South coast, north winds 15 knots, 5 foot seas, northwest winds at 10 knots with 4 foot seas for the north coast. And for the North Gulf Coast, variable winds at 10 knots, 3 foot seas, Prince William Sound, southeast at 10. Light variable winds for Cook Inlet with slight seas, and northwest at 15 for Kamishak Bay. Barren Islands, variable to south winds, 15 knots. And for the day Thursday, light variable winds for the North Gulf Coast and Prince William Sound with slight seas. For Cook Inlet, same thing, variable winds at 10 knots. And for the Barren Islands, southeast winds 15 knots. Kamishak Bay, southeast at 20. Kodiak Island, variable winds at 10 knots with 2 to 5 foot seas. Bristol Bay, variable winds at 10 knots. For the Alaska Peninsula, southeast winds 20 to 25 knots with seas as high as 6 feet. And for Thursday, gale warnings for Bristol Bay, east winds increasing to 35 knots. Gale warnings for the Alaska Peninsula, southeast winds 35 knots. And small craft advisories for Kodiak Island for east-southeast winds at 25 knots. And for the eastern Aleutians on Wednesday, 25 knots southeast winds with 7 to 9 foot seas. Central Aleutians, southwest 15 to 20 knots. And for the western Aleutians, winds will be west 25 to 30 knots. For Thursday, gale warnings for the Fox Islands, south winds 35 knots. Small craft advisories for the central Aleutians, south to southwest 25 to 30 knots. Amchitka Island, southwest winds 30 knots. And for the western Aleutians, winds will be northwest at 25 knots, with those seas out there as high as 15 feet. Pribilof Islands tomorrow, small craft advisories with southeast winds at 25 knots. Southwest coast, east winds 15 knots, northeast 20 for St. Lawrence Island, east winds 20 knots for St. Matthew Island. Thursday, St. Lawrence Island, east winds 20 knots, east-southeast winds 30 knots for smoke craft advisories on the southwest coast. Pribilof, southeast winds 30 knots, seas 10 feet. And for St. Matthew Island, northeast winds 30 knots with 10-foot seas. Central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast, winds mostly easterly at 15 knots. Brisk wind advisories for the western Arctic coast down to Cape Beaufort and Cape Thompson for 25-knot east-northeast winds. Much lighter, though, from Cape Thompson to Wales, where winds will be northeast at 10. And then for Thursday, Wales to Cape Thompson, east winds 15 knots. Brisk wind advisories from Cape Thompson to Point Lay for east winds at 25 knots. Central Arctic coast, down under brisk wind level advisories at 20 knots from the east. And then for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, brisk wind advisories, east winds 25 knots. And for tonight, look for a few flurries continuing but diminishing for the eastern Arctic coast. A few scattered isolated light snow showers north slope into the Brooks Range. And then some widely scattered isolated rain or snow showers over the eastern interior down to the eastern Alaska Range. Otherwise dry and variably cloudy over much of mainland Alaska right down to Kodiak Island. And front pushes rain into the eastern Aleutians, a weakening front. Showers over the western Aleutians, rain and snow showers over the Panhandle. And for Wednesday, mostly dry for the southeast coast, still a risk of a shower in the north and to the south, but that'll be light, and a chance of showers over mainland Alaska, but they'll be pretty widely scattered and isolated all the way up to the north slope. Dry and mostly sunny over the southwest part of the state, including the Kuskokwim Valley into Cook Inlet, and partly sunny for the Kenai Peninsula and Prince William Sound, Copper River Basin. And that front keeps rain going, light rain going for the Alaska Peninsula up to about possibly Sand Point, wet for the Pribilof, showery for the Aleutians. And for Thursday, look for dry conditions. Winds, as I mentioned, up to 25 knots for the eastern Arctic coast. And trough swinging northwestward there brings a band of moisture with it for some rain and snow showers from the Norton Sound area into the southwest interior, spreading into St. Lawrence Island in the afternoon. And down to the south, another surge of moisture for the Alaska Peninsula.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.